Hey everybody, welcome to this month of Staffing Monthly, where we have a great episode for you here today as we talk about something that is becoming more and more important by the day, and that is your online brand reputation as an agency. It matters more than you think, and you actually have more control and influence over it than you have ever had in the past. However, there's a massive cost of inaction that most agencies are starting to experience because they're not taking the proper steps to curate and manage that online brand reputation. And I had the pleasure of seeing this guide pop up in my inbox recently that was actually sent out from ClearlyRated. And it really is this kind of a mini masterclass or best practices on how to optimize your online brand. So I immediately reached out to them and I'm like, hey, I want to talk about this. People need to hear this, more in depth. And I actually got one of the top highest people in the entire organization. I have the chief product officer and co-founder of ClearlyRated. I have Nathan Goff here with us today. And Nathan, I just want to welcome you to Staffing Monthly. And I just want to thank you for taking some time to talk about this guide and the principles of online reputation management.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity. This is a subject matter that we have, a lot of interest in. It's something we've been talking about for a long time, and are really excited to help the staffing industry really understand how they can deal with this issue, because it's a very real thing that needs to be managed. And so, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be able to chat about it today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I really want to start right in the beginning of where this guy started out. And for anyone that's listening to this, if you haven't seen this guide, there's a link right on page here that you can just click and go check it out. But I think you guys did an amazing job with this guide, kind of setting the table. And the question that we have is like, what's the first step that you would expect a prospective client or even candidate to take when considering working with your staffing agency, right? And then you basically said, if you answered search for us online, you'd be right. So let's start there. Like how has the brand reputation or searching online influenced, how's it changed over the past few years, and how is it influencing buyers or candidates' perception about who they want to work with?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and so this is something actually we've been talking about for a really long time, because we do lots of industry research, as many of you know, and we've been following these buyer trends for a long time, both on the candidate side, client side, and seeing just as you have more and more influence of online reviews in the B2C space. So when you're buying things on Amazon or whatever, you're used to having 1,000 reviews for something. That has then made its way into all parts of B2B buying and the candidate experience as well. So it's something that's been coming for a long time, and we're seeing just more and more folks not really managing that. And so that was really we really wanted to get out there and get in front of this and give people some resources to really understand how you should manage this, because this is something that has been, I wouldn't necessarily even say in the last 2 years it's changed. It's been changing for a long time. Yeah. And every study we do every year, I just was reading yesterday, our analytics team has showed me some sort of early insights from a big candidate study we're in the middle of doing right now. And online star rating, number of star ratings, and of the firm is now like bumping up just right behind a referral from a friend, as far as whether they would pick a staffing firm to work with or not. So it's right there at the top. And it's been making its way there really over the last decade.
And that makes sense to me, because it really is. That's the consumer nature that we live in. And it just happened to me yesterday. I'm actually my family and I are planning a trip to the West Coast in the near future, and I'm just considering hotels, Airbnbs, all that kind of stuff. You kind of want to see like what are your options, and you start to look at the ratings. But there was one Airbnb that I was like, this is a really cool property. This would be kind of neat. And I was scrolling down the page to see like, will it work for us? And you get to the review section, and the most recent review was not great. It was not ideal. Overall, they had a pretty good starting, but that most recent review was like, and I'm like, I was like, yeah, I'm going to stay away. And that was it. Like, I X'd out of that listing and like no more. But it's different in staffing. Like Airbnb, they got a ton of listings. Amazon, like, it's amazing. Like, how does this product have 16 million 5-star reviews? Like, but with staffing, like, there isn't a lot of ratings and reviews. So like, where are people going to be making the statement, yes, it matters so much? Like, how are they finding reviews about staffing agencies?
You'd actually be surprised. Staffing has, so we work across a lot of different B2B industries, and staffing has quite a few more than you'd find in most other B2B, primarily because of the candidate. And so that's the strongest reason I think for staffing to really care a lot about this is they get so disproportionately affected by the candidate. So oftentimes a candidate has a bad experience where they're placed. They put all that blame back on the staff firm. So they come and light up the staffing firm with a terrible review that really is a result of something related to that, the job where they were. And so for staffing, they're getting these exist out there more. So not like you're saying, like you don't have thousands like you would an Amazon product, but most firms of any size will have, whether they know it or not, they'll have reviews on Google. For the most part, that's where a lot of them are. Sometimes on Glassdoor as well. But that's those two sites. Google's really the primary one. Yelp doesn't. There isn't a lot there. It takes a lot of effort for folks to make a Yelp review. But which arguably is also why potentially Yelp is actually a little more trustworthy than even Google reviews are. But yeah, most firms will find they have them out there, and a lot if you've got multiple locations, you're kind of in a worse situation even there, because then there are often fewer of them, maybe only 5 or less, and they are disproportionately skewed really negative typically in those situations, which is really not a fair representation.
And so that's a great segue into where I wanted to go next within this particular guide. And we'll have a later question specifically about what agencies might be able to do if they got an unfair negative review, but we'll table that one. But obviously you're talking about how the candidate review is more prominent because there's more of those interactions, there's more of those transactions. So and there's some that are going to be positive and they have glowing experiences, and there's some that are going to be negative for some reason or another. But I feel like most agencies don't really know how to properly manage it, and I've heard some rules of thumb. Like I know that Brad Guiley from Haley has this 2 response rule to negative, comments. Like he'll make sure he responds. And if the person is still negative, he'll respond again. But if they keep going, he cuts it off. Is there a process that you suggest or recommend for agencies when they're actually managing these reviews from candidates or clients, regardless if they're positive or negative?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's not necessarily always easy to know what to do in those situations. But the worst thing you can do is to just ignore it, because the reality is people are going to read it, especially if it's negative, because a lot of these platforms will pull those up higher, even though they potentially happened longer ago. If people find them valuable, which oftentimes the more negative and well, I don't know, hyped up they are, people like that kind of content, right? Yeah. So oftentimes those will end up higher, but not responding at all is sort of the biggest first mistake. And so, you really have to be, and we talk about this in the guide, it's really about having ownership of someone internal in the organization who is monitoring that and has got that as part of their process. There's tools available too out there. There's tons of them where you can monitor, manage, and see when new ones come in. But making sure you've gone out, first step, and I think a lot of people have already done this, but if you haven't, you really absolutely should make sure you own your Google, log into your Google business account. So every one of your locations, if you have multiple locations, will have a page, will have and that's where ratings are already coming in, whether you do anything about that or not. And so making sure you've claimed all those across the sites. It always starts with Google because they control so much. But Yelp and all the other ones as well. And getting in there and just making sure you're turning notifications on and managing that process so that when feedback does come in, it isn't being ignored. And we generally speaking also try to go in and thank people for positive feedback as well. It just shows that engagement. So that's a good general rule. But if you're bare minimum not going in, at least responding to the negative feedback, it just looks like you don't care when people come in and read that later, and that's not what you want. I would imagine, like in your Airbnb example, had the owner written a really written something to that feedback that really talked about it and showed they cared, and you may have had a different experience. You still may not have picked it, but at least you would have more likely chance you would have, right?
I would have, because it was a very specific review about issues with the property. And if the owner would have commented back, I mean, hey, I'm so sorry that you experienced this, and we offered you a credit, and these have been fixed. So the next people aren't gonna have to deal with that would have alleviated my concern, and I probably would have actually picked that property. But
Yeah.
you're right. There was no, like, one of the comments, or one of the parts of the comment was that the owner was like non-responsive, and they also didn't respond to the comment. I'm like, okay, I both didn't have this issue. Like,
Yeah.
we stuck. So
Yeah, they just confirmed it for you. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like when you think about making a decision, especially for your job, like this is a big deal. Or on the client side, you're hiring someone that's going to be bringing people into your organization. Like it doesn't, the stakes don't get much higher than that. And I think that's the part that I think people have missed over time is like you see this happening for whether you pick a hotel or a restaurant. That's not a very consequential decision. Bringing a staffing firm into your business, bringing new employees, picking a friend to work with to get a job, those are huge decisions. There's no way that that whole same behavior of wanting to know what that experience is going to be potentially like at the time isn't going to just massively impact the B2B experience as well. And so that's absolutely what's happened. And that just lack of a response to that, to the feedback, especially negative feedback, just makes it feel like you don't care. And they're just going off tiny bits of information. Like all you really have when you're trying to make a decision, if you have choices. And so every little bit matters. And how you respond, this is the art part that honestly is difficult to even really tell people how to do it right. But that response that you make to that feedback is what really, changes how someone views that feedback, and really working hard to not be defensive in that and in how you respond to that, which sometimes is very difficult when it feels very unfair. But you still got to do it. Like at the end of the day, if you don't, it just doesn't look good.
yeah, no, I agree. And about that response, like, I think it's an amazing opportunity for the agency to really let their brand and the voice of their brand come through, right? So I feel like there's a great opportunity to work with marketing or work with a marketing consultant if you don't have a marketing team, depending on your size, to really identify like what's the tone, what's the messaging, and like how do we want to portray ourselves to the positive and negative reviews, and then maybe set up some baseline scripts, right? And then and then teach people how to deploy the scripts, and then also how to go a little bit off script, when it becomes a little bit more conversational, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the other thing to remember in those situations, and especially when it comes to the candidate side, probably less so on the client side, but the candidate side, a lot of times what you're seeing is someone feeling helpless and without power, right? And so that's the one piece of power people have today, that they can make things very difficult for you as a business if they're feeling like they don't have a way, their voice isn't being heard. So if you remember that as you're building those scripts and as you're responding to those, just trying to get in the mindset of that person who wrote that, like the more you come across as trying to take back more power, like you're just creating this power struggle that is not going to be beneficial to you. And so it's so much more about trying to make them feel heard, even if they're being very unrealistic and they're wrong. That's probably what's most likely going to diffuse it and turn it into something that actually is something that is more positive for your business versus a negative.
It makes a ton of sense, and I think you're spot on with that. But then you it doesn't stop there though, right? Like you need to take that feedback, good or bad, and then discuss it internally. Because when people, and I know it's frustrating when people are like, oh, and they leave a negative review, and you're like, oh, why do they do that? And why is it so public and whatnot? But if they're willing to give you feedback, that is an opportunity to improve. I feel like the worst thing is that someone recognizes something negative or bad about your agency and they don't tell you, right? So like there's got to be part of the communication process of managing reviews that actually creates closure on like communicating internally, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean that's, if you're not learning from every one of those pieces of feedback, then you're not doing it right. At the end of the day, there's something to be learned by every situation. I mean, it's so rare that there's ever anything that you had no impact on at all that you couldn't have potentially avoided. So yeah, I mean that's paramount. Like you gotta take that feedback, internalize it, understand what's going on there, learn what happened in that situation. Especially as you've got a large organization, you've got people kind of different locations and stuff. There's differences, and we see that in our data like crazy. One location can be very differently in another location, or even different teams and how that experience is. So making sure you're understanding, well, is there something in our processes that is being done differently at this location versus other one team to another, to really understand where you can improve.
That makes a ton of sense. But I want to figure out, like, how do we balance it? Because I feel like candidates are more likely, because that's the more consumer side, they're more likely to just go leave an unprompted review. So, and clients, I feel, are less likely to go leave an unprompted review. So obviously best practice is you should be asking people to go leave reviews, right? But how do you do that with a client? Like, what is there do you have like a game plan or advice or guidance on how you actually can amp up or get more client reviews?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by telling you the way you shouldn't do it, because it matters a lot. So it's actually quite illegal to target certain clients and ask them to give you online reviews, candidates too, but happens more often in client side. So there's a whole bunch of, if you want to deep dive on FTC regulations around what they call review gating, because it's a pretty big thing now. So whatever you do, however you do it, you make sure you're not trying to just go ask people you think will give you a good review to give you a good review.
So no cherry picking is not allowed.
Yeah, no, that's real bad. And all the platforms are trying to weed that out. But ultimately what we recommend, and it's built into our product, is just, if you have cadences in which you are communicating with clients, whatever that is. For our clients, when they go out and do a survey, we have the ability for them to build that into the survey process. If you've got regular communication that goes out to a client for whatever reason, having a simple directed ask, like, we'd love you to share your experience online with your peers. And that's one of the things, I don't remember if we put this into the guide or not, but one of the ways that's most compelling to get people in a business relationship to share their feedback online is to really tie it into how they're helping other people in their same position. When you think about it, you're having to make a decision of who to work with in a B2B relationship. You care about helping that next person who's in your same spot, trying to have to make that the same decision. So if you can tie that request in, and that's kind of how we word it within our survey as well, to like help other people like you learn how great or not this firm is, because again, you don't want to do any sort of gating of that. And so we build that into our survey process. And it's best, you don't want to, one of the things the platforms like Google and others are getting really good at is detecting when someone's gone out and done like a really concentrated, you go and try to get 100 of these in a day or something. They'll flag that, they'll remove them. So all that work you've done to get them, they just shut them off, and getting them turned back on is not easy. So it's a nice constant trickle is really kind of what you want to aim for. And so if you've got some process, either you build it into your communication process with your clients, or every time a project ends or a placement completes, whatever you want to base it on, or the survey like you do with us, build it into that. And you don't actually want a huge response, because you just want a nice, consistent trickle, and people will do it. And what our experience, you ask them, and you'll find on the client side, especially, it skews really heavy to people who are happy with you. So while you should not review gate, it's illegal to open it to everyone. What you'll find, and what we find, it's something like 90% of the people who go and leave a review out of our survey are promoters. So people are really happy. And there's a real, like 7% are passives and 3% are detractors. So you're not going to get, everyone worries about that. Like, oh my gosh, ask everyone. I have all these people who are pissed off, are going to go give me a bunch of, that's not what happens in reality. Because in a business relationship, usually you care, as someone who's buying the services, you care about the companies you work with. And if you're happy, you want to help them out. And I think that people just need to be asked.
I think that's actually a really good observation, is that realistically, if your clients are doing business with you still, there's a good chance that they actually will give you a positive review, right? And if they are likely to give you like a slammed review where that's all negative, you probably already know that. I'm not saying to exclude them from asking, but you would probably have already heard that. Yeah. So it shouldn't come as a shock. And so I got to ask the question. I know that, ClearlyRated is a tool to help manage this, and not everyone wants to do it on their own, because there are some regulations around it that people want to steer clear of. You guys have that built into your software, right? So like if someone's using ClearlyRated to do this, they don't have to worry about, gating reviews or anything like that, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we have built into all the main platforms. So Google being the primary one, Facebook, Indeed, Glassdoor, G2 if you're outside of staffing. So yeah, we built that in and make it easy for the survey taker as well to just copy what they've already provided, because they've given you already the contents of a review in the survey itself, typically good, bad, or otherwise. And so we make it really easy for them to go put that out there, and then you can just target whatever ones you're looking to increase on. So it's a good way, like, because I think the hardest part for staffing is trying to outweigh that candidate. Because none of these platforms allow you. We do on our platform, but nobody else allows you to distinguish who is the audience that's giving this. Right. Which is really the bummer about a lot of these platforms. It's just all mixed and skews really heavy candidate.
Yeah, that is interesting. Hopefully they can sort that out. The more platform-esque our society grows, like it would be nice to distinguish that. So yeah. With the work of actually cultivating reviews and having more of a rating and review process in place and scripting and knowing how to do all this, and let's assume that someone's going to do this work and they're going to be getting more reviews. What's a way that they can shine a spotlight on it? Like, how can they actually leverage these reviews to increase candidate flow, increase lead generation or client flow? What are some best practices on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing we know is that people find these on their own, but we also know a lot of people don't look. Or they look and they don't see them. And so there's a ton of opportunity, both internally to take, victory lap almost internally of like, look at all the great things we're doing and sharing those, because assuming that your employees are looking at that stuff is probably a bad assumption. Most people don't internally, but there's oftentimes really fantastic information there and sort of help people really get excited about what they do every day. But taking those and building those into your sales and marketing flows, pointing people to those, using it in your email signatures. And there's so many ways in which you can take that really positive experiential data that you have, that proof point that you have, and build it into those processes and assume people are going to sometimes find it on their own, and oftentimes will, but also assume that they may not always. And so the more you can really bake that into how you, if it's good, and bake that into your all your various workflows on the sales and marketing side is really what you need to do.
And there's no regulation around that, right? So like if you get 20 good reviews and 5 bad reviews, like you can cherry pick and be like, hey, I'm going to use these good reviews in my marketing. I'm going to use them in that. Like, as long as I'm not, restricting people the access to leave a negative review, I'm compliant. I can choose which ones to use and how, right?
Yeah. If you want to, pick the 3-5 stars that were really great reviews, you can put those in there. The only thing you get in trouble with is you manipulate the star rating. Like obviously that would be a problem, but but I think the also thing to remember too is that people aren't dumb. So like if you just pick 3 to 5 5-star reviews and that's all you show, you don't show your overall star rating, that can actually be a detrimental thing. Like people want to see that there's, this is based on, I've got a 4.75 based on 400 reviews. Like that's really more impactful than showing the 3 really good ones.
Sure. And in the recruiting industry, there's actually, while most agencies still do reference checks, kind of the inside joke is if you're a candidate and you can't find 3 people to say nice things about you, like that would be a problem, right? So it goes along the same way, it's like if you're only showing the 3 reviews, it's like, okay, that's like so
especially if they're like 3 years old. So that's the other thing, like recency matters.
Yes.
And that's why this is not a game. Like people often are looking for a silver bullet of I'm gonna go do this one thing and then I'm done. Like this is a game you're gonna play for the foreseeable future. So you need to be always on top of getting new content this way, because that recency matters a ton.
It really does. And the last thing I'll say about the guide, and then I got just 2 last questions for you, is there's also near the end of the guide, you have some best practices in here for like how to build momentum kind of quickly and create visibility. So if anyone out there is watching this and you're like, hey, I want to really focus on this part, which should be everybody, especially going into 2024, like you should put an emphasis on this. There's literally no downside to improving your online reputation. It is all upside across the board. So there's some great tips on that piece right there. So I'd encourage people to go check this guide out. But Nathan, the last couple questions I have, earlier you mentioned something about there's tools out there that people can use for like reputation management or to be notified on different platforms or whatnot. Is there anything that you might recommend just to kind of put a name to that statement in case someone's poking around and they want to like get head in the right direction on a tool?
Yeah, you put me on the spot, and I have not remembering the names because we don't use them.
Okay.
So just Google it. There's literally hundreds of them out there that can track where you're at. But almost more important than those tools, what I would say is get on the actual platform. So make sure you've got an account on Google, and it's an email address and someone that is actually at the company. And so, because a lot of communication comes directly from Google, Indeed, Glassdoor, Facebook. So making sure those matter more than really the tools. The tools are a nice benefit to try to actually sort of see maybe what's happening, trends, things like that. But a lot of notifications of new reviews and stuff are going to come directly from those platforms. So that's the primary thing you should really focus on.
That makes a ton of sense there. And last question I have, and I hope I don't put you on the spot with this one, but this is one that I know is it happens. Sometimes somebody will leave a review, like a candidate will go leave a review for an agency and it's not even the right agency, or they'll leave a review and they'll say things that are just disparaging about maybe the recruiter or the salesperson or something. They leave a review that is not really helpful. It's just vitriol. It's not good. I know these platforms don't want that. They want authentic reviews. So is there a way, a technique, a tip that might help agencies maybe get those removed? And not removing all negative reviews, but like the ones that truly have no basis or bearing. Like, is there anything that you're aware of to maybe help agencies that have some of that on there?
Yeah, so most platforms have a process that you can submit and ask them to consider removing a review. My experience, we have never had to do that ourselves, but everything I know is that process is not often in your favor. So it's not often that they're going to actually remove it. But they do have those processes, and you should. If it's very clear this person has never worked with us or is some other level of really unfair that you can communicate, you certainly should try those, and you'll have to dig into each one because they're each different on how they do that. But so that's definitely an option. The other thing, especially in the case of somebody who seems to like never have worked with you, those ones are actually pretty easy to deal with, because one of the ways I recommend responding to those particular ones is you can literally say, as the owner of the business, you can go in and respond. And one of the things you should just say is like, hey, Sally Smith, whoever it is, the person that wrote it, we looked in our systems, we're not seeing that you've worked with us before. We definitely want to make sure you had a great experience. Please reach out. We'd love to talk to you about this, but we don't see that we ever, placed you or something like along those lines. So you're sort of kind of putting it back on them a little bit, but the reader then who comes back later can very easily see, oh, it doesn't look like they may be mistaken. So I think it really, makes the impact of that negative review in that situation, it really neutralizes that quite a bit. Because I think most people can read between the lines, like, I don't think this person really actually worked with them. So that's the best way. Typically, something along those lines is usually how you respond to that. And then the really like overly aggressive, unfair negative ones, those, honestly, those are tough, and you have to take them case by case. But again, what I would say is, like, if you can't get it removed, which again, the odds of getting it removed are relatively low, you have to make sure you just don't come across confrontational in that. And however you can do that, the best way possible that you've, and can communicate what you have done, right? Because that's what the person who's reading that review really mostly wants to see, what you did, how you reacted to that particular situation. I think if it's so extreme, most humans will read that and go, that's like, there's no way it's that bad, or this person's being unfair. So I think that you have to also recognize that most people reading these things are probably not like that person leaving it. And so as long as you're having a balanced response, and I like that concept of don't try to litigate this over a whole bunch of responses, right? Kind of a once or twice and done sort of thing, I think is really the best way, because that never it never ends well when you start to go back and forth, because that's not really what you want. You really want to communicate the person who's reading it that if you're there, you've heard them, you're happy to keep talking about it, like reach out to us and let's communicate about this some more. And any ways you can sort of show that they're being unrealistic in a way that isn't actually like having this confrontational thing in the comments is going to be best. But it's not easy, unfortunately. It's just not a
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I've seen some agencies kind of take one of the routes, like platform by platform, and say, hey, this, flag the review and say it kind of does violate the terms and conditions of the site. And that's you can get some traction there, but really trying to reach out to the person, diffuse the situation, and then find resolution. Because as you mentioned, most people that are leaving negative reviews, they don't feel heard, they feel alienated, and they feel like they've been wronged in some way. And if a lot of times just reaching out to them and talking to them and offering some level of resolution, and then once it's resolved, asking if they can go in and leave an updated review or edit their review to reflect the new state of things. And a lot of times that works really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Nathan, man, I am grateful for your time here today and just kind of picking your brain on how to help agencies improve their brand reputation. Is there anything that you want to share that we missed, or if someone wants to get a hold of you and learn more about this or more about Clearly Rated, like what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So I think the only thing I would say, and really is where I would focus your attention, if you're not doing this already, is making sure you're going upriver on this problem. So we didn't really talk a lot about that, but if you don't already have a process right now where you're regularly engaging either through a survey process, ideally, and measuring that experience, both clients, candidates, and even internal employees, if you're not already doing that, you're just making this job of managing your online reputation so much harder. If you catch the problems earlier before people go leave the review, you don't have to worry about how to respond to the review because they haven't left the negative review. So that's sort of my, make sure you're really building those processes. If you don't already do that, along with what you do with managing what the reputation that's out there now, and that's going to pay off in dividends over time. So you use tools like what we have that can do a lot of other things for you, referrals and reviews and all the things. So if you want to learn more about us, ClearlyRated.com, just hop over there and we'd love to chat with you and talk about how we can help you with all of your experience management and online reputation needs. We can do it all for staffing, and we've been doing it there for a long time. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it, Dan.
Awesome, man. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.